Should we start the discussion? Has everyone joined?
Hi, I'm here, Timisha.
Yeah, Timisha, please proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of UNICEF India and ICC India, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the panel discussion on advancing childcare for an inclusive economy. We would especially want to thank Basic Healthcare Services, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and our partner organization, UNICEF, for joining us as panelists today. We would also like to thank our corporate member, Bharti Airtel, for joining us in this panel. My name is Timisha Dadij, and I'm a knowledge management consultant with the Center for Family-Friendly Policies and Inclusive Economy at ICC India. Today, we'll have a fantastic discussion on employer-provided childcare and how it promotes an inclusive economy. However, before we get started, allow me to say a few words about ICC India. We are the India office of the Paris-based International Chamber of Commerce, which represents business organizations from more than 100 countries across the globe. ICC has been in existence for more than a century and was granted the observer status by the United Nations, making it the only global organization to discuss business issues at the UN. We work 24/7 to create impact on lives and livelihood of people across the globe. ICC India and UNICEF India joined hands to set up a Center for Family-Friendly Policies and Inclusive Economy, which is a repository of global and national best practices and supports businesses that would like to adapt and implement family-friendly policies and contribute to the inclusive economy. I have the pleasure today to welcome our panelists, Ms. Neha Sharma, who is Head Talent, Learning and Culture of Bharti Airtel, Ms. Rupa Rawat, who is Lead Consultant, Basic Healthcare Services, Ms. Shipra Sharma, who is Early Childhood Development Specialist at UNICEF India, and Dr. Bekhom Basu, who is Assistant Professor, CHIS Mumbai. Today's discussion aims to raise awareness about employer-provided childcare in Indian context. And we are also aiming towards highlighting current challenges and discussing way forward. Each panelist will offer a brief overview of their work in this topic, related to this topic for 5 minutes. And after that, we'll be offering you a chance to ask specific questions. As a moderator, it is also my responsibility to make sure that we stick to the time frame for the discussion. So I think we should start the discussion, the presentations now. I would like to invite Ms. Rupa to start with the discussion.
So first of all, namaste, and thank you very much ICC and Timisha, especially ICC for creating this platform where we are talking about the family-friendly policy. So just brief about my background. I belong to the healthcare industry and spent almost 1.5 decades there. And being a nurse and working in that healthcare sector where the more than 60% human resource are female. So this topic is very close to my heart. And being itself, like I've been to every phase of that life, as an employee, as an employer, as an administrator, and ultimately I start talking loudly about, as creating advocacy about this topic, because I've seen tears in the eyes of nurses when they couldn't get that good maternity leave, and they are the sole breadwinner in their family, so they feel like shattered and helpless. I've seen, that gender diversity when you talk about the management and boardroom, maximum males are there because, most of the female and those who are, very highly qualified, but still they couldn't reach to that point because they have to be at home and taking care of baby. So ultimately that management biasness towards the gender. And I've seen the doctors had to leave their studies. Even with my colleagues, I've seen multiple times the incidences where doctors pressed hard to leave their fellowship in between because just they got pregnant and they wanted to have maternity leave. Apart from that, I have a very good experiences where I've seen multiple organizations actually inviting and luring the health professionals by telling them that we are having this childcare policy. So I have seen many people who are opting the organization where they are finding that childcare, friendly environment. I still wanted to say it environment, not policy, because this environment is entirely, totally, depend on the mercy of the management. If the management change, then that mercy goes away, and ultimately that whole, childcare environment turned up again. That mother has to and father has to, work, take care of their baby by their own. I've seen a fight of a male uh, person who really wanted to opt the paternity leave, and that paternity leave was not that policy of that organization. So he had to fight because he and his wife were, living alone, and they were nobody to take care of her wife and a baby. So, with that note, I really wanted to talk, like as Timisha said, that how it is important to have this type of family-friendly policies, and especially in healthcare. And when you turn the table and you come to this side and started looking as an employer, I have seen multiple times the talented human resource healthcare professional, they are just turned down, just seeing chuda in their hands, because that employer and the interviewer automatically think that, oh, after a few months she will gonna be pregnant, and she's not the right candidate for me to invest on. At the same time, I really talk about that, if and especially in healthcare, like, I'm sorry, I'm just diverting it towards the healthcare, because I've seen huge human resource, and especially the female, and they are suffering a lot, not because having this policy, because it is high time. It should not be just a culture of our organization. It should not be on the organizational basis. It is high time that state and country should take a call and come up with this good policy, where we can actually bring the gender diversity at workplace. So it's important to have good such policy where women is also allowed to work freely. She should be really happy that when she is going back to home, she should not be obliged to somebody that, oh, you take care of my baby. And I have seen multiple times, families actually, couples are divorcing just because of few such incidences, and they are actually finding it very difficult. I've seen single parents, they're struggling a lot, and they have to depend on their relatives, and they're fulfilling their undue demands just because they are taking care of their babies. So I just wanted to say that system is working for the community, and and at the same time, system is getting employees from the community. So it is high time we should come up with this integrated policy to strengthen the system and see employee not just as a professional but as an individual. We should think about, if we'll take care of their personal need, they will be, if we'll take care of their social need, they will be the better professional, their productivity would be better, and their retention would be better, the quality of work would be better, and ultimately we will be serving the community better. With that note, thank you very much for giving me opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Rupa, for sharing your insights about the situation with respect to hiring also, and what are the grassroots challenges faced by women, especially who are newly into childcare and are working mothers. Um, I would like to now like to invite Miss Neha, and she'll be sharing about her insights as an HR. Yeah.
Thank you, Timisha. And I think all of us can speak that the reason why we are here is because we're all passionate about this topic. I've had a career of 15 years at Airtel, and I have a 7-year-old. So 50% of my career actually has been enabled because of what the ecosystem and what the organization brings, to my ability to have a childcare support system. I just will maybe anchor the conversation around a few slides that I put together for the group. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So this is actually just a stark sort of, it's not new. Everybody knows this, but I've just tried to put some numbers there, which are very related to what we are speaking today. When we interact with a lot of individuals who leave us, women who leave us, also when you see a large scale research out there, you find that there are really two inflection points that a lot of women end up leaving the workforce, right? Either it's when they get married, or it's when they have a child. And the third one is around senior care or elder care, parental care that has come about, right? And all of these have actually taken a turn for the worse, or a more drastic turn over the last 2.5 years as the pandemic hit, because a large part of the burden of what had to be done at home also fell onto women, right? So that these responsibilities became even more stark. And what you also find is that there are equal or more number of women actually wanting to return to the workplace, but there are inhibitions that they face with respect to what kind of roles they will get, what is the pay that they will get, right? So pay equality, etc. And those are really big time, real time problems that all of us are grappling with in the corporate world. Um, I don't think I need to spend too much time here. I think everybody is aware that it just makes every kind of sense, financial, corporate citizenship, every kind, to have more women in the workforce, to have a more inclusive workforce. So, that's something that I think has been proven time and again. So it's not something that I want to spend too much time on today. I want to actually just move on quickly to the trends in the corporate sector, right? And there are 3 or 4 things that are the benefits that are provided as per law. And, it's amazing that we've now reached a point where we have 26 weeks of paid maternity leave. There's another notification that came out, which was around every establishment having 50 or more employees, having a crèche facility, or a tie-up with a close-by crèche where parents can visit. And finally, nursing breaks till the child is 15 months old. And I think all of these are actually really great steps in the right direction to provide a child care support system. But I think at Airtel, we realized that it was not enough, basis what we heard from the women in the workforce, as well as any parent in the workforce. And therefore, we've come up with a couple of other things that we provide as a policy, as a support system to actually enable new parents to stay in work. And I think the first one is really, how do you create a support system? Because in large parts, women tend to leave because they don't have a support system. And while we recognize that controlling this will be a little bit difficult for us because it's an unorganized sector, we chose to actually trust our employees to avail it in the right way. And therefore, we provide a childcare allowance of 7,000 rupees a month to new mothers until a child is about 1.5 years old. That's something that we've brought about. We have a subsidized creche facility in some of our offices and tie-ups with creches where we don't have a facility on campus. What we also realized is that there is a little bit of an inhibition for mothers to take leaves for a vaccination. Children are falling sick very often in the first 3 years. And therefore, what we said is that in addition to the leaves that we give to all our employees, we will provide 2 additional childcare leaves per quarter so that mothers, fathers can be there in the moments that matter. The third one is to enable parents to come back at their own pace, right? So we've provided flexible work options where new mothers can actually choose to maybe work a few hours each day or a few days each week, so that they can come back at their own pace and set up that support system at home while they're away. And I think that's one big step that we've taken recently. I think the other big one as an organization which we wanted to support was also to say that mothers are not the only ones who are eligible or who are relevant to provide support to childcare. And therefore, one of the things that we've done is to say that if there is a father who is a primary caregiver, we will extend the 26 weeks of leave even to the father. So that's an additional thing we've done. Where the fathers are secondary caregivers, the parenting, the paternity leave also applies. Secondly, we have a sabbatical policy, which enables people to take a break if they want to do that, to manage dual roles at home. And I think the big one around the inhibition to come back to work, Rupa also spoke about it, will I get the tough assignment? Will I get a challenging role? And therefore, we say that when new mothers come back, we want to make sure that they either come back to the same role or a similar role. And that role will be kind of held for them while they're away on maternity leave. So these are some of the things that Airtel does in addition to what the law requires, to make sure that new parents have all the support that they need as they come back to work. One big initiative that we've taken to reintegrate women into the workforce is a program that we recently launched called Step In, which provides new mothers or women on a career break, or actually women in tier 2, tier 3 towns where Airtel may not have physical office locations, to actually work for Airtel, because a lot of women sometimes can enter the workforce but can't do it because they have location constraints. And therefore, these are individuals who can actually work from the comfort of their home, where the support system, the ecosystem of having a laptop, a system, productivity tools, etc., is provided by Airtel. And they're actually treated like our full-time employees. So this is another great direction. We've had more than 25 women who've joined us as part of this program in the last 2 months, and we hope to expand this into other parts of Airtel as well. So that's one program that we brought in. So those are really some of the things that Airtel is doing to integrate women, parents back into the workforce and providing a really solid ecosystem to support new parents. That's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neha. And reintegration programs are really interesting. I have also come across some programs with the other companies as well, and I think they are very important. Given the contribution of women into the company's growth, also, and in the economy in general. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Shipra to present. Shipra, are you able to share screen?
Not yet. Somebody needs to make me co-host.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah, perfect. Thanks, Neha. I think you have covered good amount of slides for me as well. Because while I was going to talk about the childcare support, there were a lot of components that you already covered. But before I get into the whole piece on childcare support and how it helps in advancing early childhood development, I think it's important for us to also take a couple of minutes to understand the science behind early childhood development. Like, why is it that we are talking so much about early years? So quickly, getting to the first evidence that comes from, of course, the Nobel laureate James Heck. He did a longitudinal study, realized that if we are investing in the first couple of years for the young child and providing the child with the right kind of psychosocial stimulation, or let's say a quality childcare, somewhere the returns are much higher in terms of that the children who are getting this support are earning way higher than their counterparts. Now, what does that mean? That means in our Indian currency, if we invest 1 rupee now in the first 2 years or 4 years or 5 years of life, we are going to get a return of 25 rupees. And that's what he said is a smart investment. When you are when we are making the investment earlier, the returns are getting really high. But as we go and progress in terms of towards the preschool program, schooling program, and as we increase the investment, the returns are not so high. The reason of so why he calls it smart investment is the reason lies in what is happening with the young child. So that then comes the neuroscientists, who talks about how the brain is getting how children are developing. So if we look at this figure, so by the time the child is 1 year, the 60% of brain growth is already happening. So what's happening there? What exactly is happening is that the child is continuously, every second, the child's brain is making 1 million neural connections. So when I talk about connections, what does that mean? That means that in the environment, at that point in the early years, the child's brain is so receptive, is so ready for all the for the experiences that the caregiver can give them in terms of sensory inputs. So the child is ready to hear so many voices. The child wants to grab everything, touch, smell, taste, play with. Wants to see a lot of colors. Wants to explore everything which is around the child. The child is ready to get experience every sensory inputs, from the caregiver. And as the age progresses, the child is ready for the language inputs. They want to be read there. They want to hear the same songs, same lullabies, stories. So what child is doing here, every interaction that is happening with the child, he's making connections in his brain. And when that activity is repeating again and again, those connections are getting strengthened. So if you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that how sensory inputs, how the brain is so ready for the sensory inputs, followed with the language and cognitive. Now, at this point, the caregiver doesn't have to do much, but just to interact with the child, just to engage the child. And a lot of this development happens on its own. It doesn't mean that the development stops after this point. No, it doesn't. But it's just that at this point, if the children are getting positive experiences, the development would be massive. But at the same time, if children are facing extreme neglect, abuse, or violence, then it can also result into a deficits in development at this point. So while the brain is developing rapidly, it's also important to understand what is it that brain and the body needs, at this time. So when we talk about for the lifelong health and for the brain to thrive, the child needs five components. It's not either or. It's about getting adequate nutrition. So from the young age, we all have heard of how breast milk, breastfeeding is important for the young child to get all the total nutrition. And then after 6 months, the supplementary nutrition is critical. Why? Because brain is growing. All the nutrition is going towards building that brain, so that and all the energy is going towards the brain in the years. And at the same time, the child needs to have a preventive health care and also promotive health care, where he or she can be taken care of and can be safeguarded from the illnesses. The also the illnesses that happens due to unhygienic sanitation facilities. So these are the components which ensure that the child survives. But at the same time, for thriving, what do they need? They need some responsive caregiver in vicinity, the one who understand what they need, the one who can understand the cues, act on those cues and respond. Like, for example, the child is hungry, he's giving the cues. Can that caregiver understand and respond? The child is wet, giving the cues. The child is feeling uneasy, uncomfortable. So responsive caregiving is very critical to ensure that the child's needs are met. At the same time, it's critical for the child to be safe from harm, abuse, or any neglect. So safety and security becomes critical. And because I was talking about this critical period, it's also important to screen the children for the delays. Because early intervention at this point can also help the children to gain a lot of skills that they, in case if go undetected, might lose that opportunity. And very important is the opportunities for early learning. The children needs to be talked to. They need to be played with. Even a simple peekaboo game can make their their brains has so many connections forming. So all these components are so critical when it comes to the brain to thrive. And if you look at on the left hand side, you could easily see which brain has more connections and which brain doesn't have that. So in the first slide, in the first picture, you could see that the connections are very less, which means the child is only surviving. And if you look at the second slide, you'll see that there are so many connections which are forming in the child's brain, and it's actually thriving. And a simple aspect like this, a simple comprehensive program like this can really help children to reach their full potential. Um, Coming to the whole point of the child care and the support. So coming back to, so I tried to map what all does a pregnant mother and the child need. So if you see from health, nutrition to opportunities for learning, protection, the child needs all of this to survive. The child needs all of this to thrive at the same time. So whose responsibility would that be to ensure that the child is getting all these components? And I think that's where I'll also borrow from what Neha was saying, that for a mother to get back to her work, she needs to have a supportive environment. She needs to have enabling policy programs, both at the government and also at the private sector level, to be able to come back to the workforce. And for a mother to ensure that the child is exclusively breastfed, is getting all the vaccinations, is safe and secure, also is screened for for the delays, everything. The mother needs the first 6 months of maternity benefits, followed with a very quality and affordable childcare facility where the mother is confident that if I am going to if I'm returning back to a workforce, I'm sure that the child is being taken care of. And offer all these components that that the caregivers needs to provide for the young children. They need all the family friendly policies in place, because they need the financial and the institutional resources. They need allowances to pay for all these services. They need the skill and knowledge as well. The parenting programs play a really good role in helping the mothers and the fathers to understand how the child is developing. What is it that the child needs? And I think it's very critical at this point that what is it that what is it that helps in the overall development. Is it that do I go and buy that toy? Will that help in development, or do I do this activity? So that's the skills and knowledge is become very important for the caregivers. And at the same time, when we look at components like sick leaves, paid leaves, all this helps to give them the time and commitment which the child needs to develop. And while all this is happening, we cannot forget the mothers who are coming from the informal sector, who are from the marginalized families. They need the cash in kind support or unconditional cash transfers to even access these services, to even access the antenatal care, to even have a nutrition supplementation for them and for their kids. So all these components becomes very critical, not just for the mother alone, but also for the family. And it is not just a mother's or a family's responsibility. I would say it's a collective responsibility. So the while the families are there, communities are there, the state and the private sector needs to come together to provide this enabling environment. And unless the environment is that enabling and supportive, the mothers will never get a confidence to go back to the workforce. Um, Moving to just couple of last slides. I think I'll miss this one because I think all of us here are kind of converts. So I would just say that while we have talked about the parental leave, quality childcare benefits, I feel supporting breastfeeding is very, very critical. And getting those lactation breaks for for the mother especially, is very important, not just from the child health perspective, but also from their own for their own health as well. So I think that is a critical component that I wanted to highlight. And another piece is that um, I just also want to leave you with a couple of things on this, is that when we talk about the parental leave, we need to also see the larger picture over here. So through childcare, what we are doing, we are not just supporting mothers, we are actually building brains. We are building brains, we are shaping brains, which are actually going to not just the idea of contributing to the society, contributing to the community, contributing to the nation. That's what is happening when we are supporting the childcare. And the paid parental leaves, one of the research from done by ILO study highlight that just 1 month of paid parental leave in low and middle income society countries can actually lead to reduce the infant mortality rate by 13%. And that's a amazing percentage. Just 1 month, if can do that much of difference, we can think how much it can support if we actually give the support, not just the mothers but also the fathers for the parental leaves, and give them the flexibility to work at their own pace and to return to the workforce when they feel ready, and also the workforce is welcoming them with all the support that they can give. Just the last part, why I'm again and again talking about the parental and not maternity leave is because we very firmly believe that childcare is not just mother's responsibility. It is equally father's responsibility. We need to get father to the forefront. And one thing that I can tell from my experience is that caregiving, there are just two ingredients that caregiving requires. One is sensitivity. The second is responsiveness. Sensitivity to understand what the child needs, and responsiveness means to respond to that need by providing it to the child. And that is something which can be learned. That is something which can be modeled. That is something which can be coached. So anybody thinking that fathers cannot be a childcare providers, I disagree a bit. But at the same time, I feel we need to normalize the parental leave, because that would normalize the fact that fathers also need to take care of the children. One example from my work that I did in Uttar Pradesh, where we tried to get fathers to support the mothers on three simple things: feed the child, bathe the child, take care of the child for some time. What that helped in doing was that mothers who were feeling burnt out, who were feeling so stressed, they were able to get some time for themselves. They were able to report high level of the high level of connectedness with the family members. They reported less levels of loneliness, and these are the mothers who were also at risk of falling in the depression. Similarly, the rate of domestic violence incidences went down just because including the father into the child care, because they started understanding the whole component on how the child, what kind of environment does the child need, which not only impacted their relationship with each other but also improved the well-being of mothers. And moreover, I think it's important for the children to see the positive gender norms and the roles in the families, to see that it is equal for mother also to cook, to father also to feed, father also to bathe the child. It is not one person's responsibility. So I think it's critical for us uh, to to kind of internalize and normalize the whole fact that fathers also need to be at the forefront, and I think parental leave could be one of the main player in doing so. So yeah, so that's about Timisha. I know I have taken a little bit more than usual.
That's completely okay. It was a great presentation, and definitely through your presentation, we understand that early childhood childcare definitely unlocks children's potential. And currently, millions of children lack quality childcare, and it seems mostly are surviving instead of thriving. So when we are talking about thriving, I would like to invite Bekhom Basu, Dr. Bekhom Basu, to come and discuss with us what are the current provisions related to childcare in India.
Thank you, Timisha, and thank you. I think I'll also begin from where Shipra, kind of ended. That the very fact that we are here, 5 women, discussing childcare, reflects that in 2022, we are still far behind. The fact that the word care is somehow gendered, and like Neha mentioned, that child care and then elderly care. I mean, yes, in the working life of women, we do see these as, points when our careers get impacted. And somewhere I feel that, because care becomes a gendered role, also what happens, and the lack of structures, support system around us, there's also reciprocity, right? Because like often, because we don't have structure, so you have to take help from relatives, neighbors. So then, you also kind of get into that sometime you also have to return that same care, so that is something, and I think we get caught in our lives. The other aspect, which also, Shipra mentioned about the fact that the children whom we are giving birth today, or we are nurturing, whether it's adoption or natural born, 20 years down the line are going to be part of the workforce. So we better invest in their care and upbringing. So I think that becomes, again, a very important area, and where then the government needs to step in, because that's an area where we just can't rely on private support. And that brings me to the next point, to say that, we write like Neha spoke about the facilitative environment that they create. But that's only 10% of the workforce. 90% of the workforce are in informal sector, which means they have no support system whatsoever, be it, the affordability of expensive childcare, or in terms of any kind of time off from work. Because as a daily wage earner, you don't report to work, you don't get your wage. And everything else that is associated in the informal sector then gets impacted, and therefore doubles for a working mother in the informal sector. And most of them are not working out of choice; they are working out of compulsions. So you imagine for them, it's like, for some of us and 10%, even if out of the 10%, I kind of, okay, let's say that like CXO level positions, they are people who are not really, for them, it's also an option. But in today's economy, we've also kind of hoodwinked the system by hiring contractual staff. So our janitor in the office, the canteen, the receptionists, most of them, even in the corporate sector, are part of the contractual system and therefore part of the informal work sector and denied of I don't know whether the creche facilities are extended to them. I don't think they are. So that is something also that we need to look into, because otherwise we are discriminating even within working women, and when they're already discriminated enough. And then the other thing that I wanted to also bring to notice is the fact that the age of the child. Somehow we feel that, because even if you look at our laws, 6 years, up to 6 years, or up to 8 years, even the corporate sector gives creche subsidy allowances. That is the age group. But that's not really so, right? I mean, just like if you look at the education level dropouts, where most, again, a higher number of dropouts happen when girls attain puberty. That's when they don't send, in rural India, we don't send them to school because safety and protection becomes an issue. And it is far more important than whether the girl child receives education or not. Similarly, even as mothers or as parents, your adolescent child also needs to be looked after, and especially today, with the stress of board exams, mental health issues, internet safety. With all of that, we also need to reconsider the age of childcare. I mean, is it really fair to, because as a parent, your concerns don't stop when the child becomes 8 years or 10 years. In fact, many adolescent, parents of adolescent children will say that your concerns increase. That's when you need a little more support, in fact. So that is another, point that I wanted to highlight. And given all this, if you look at it, so for instance, in terms of the workforce, women's participation in the workforce has come down considerably, even post pandemic. I think right now it's probably only, I'm not so sure about the number. I can't remember the numbers, but I think it was 1 is in 6 women or 5 women who are only part of the workforce at this point in time. And this, means that, and at the same time, there has been an increase of women in the workforce, and that increase has been in the rural sector, which means that more and more rural women are joining the workforce. While overall there has been a decrease of women participating in the workforce. So one of the highlights that we need to, one of the the gaps that we need to plug in is definitely in terms of what facilities are we giving to the rural sector. Now we do have something like the Anganwadis, which in some states like in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, even in Karnataka now, where they are doubling up as daycare centers. So they're increasing the times so that more and more women can leave their children for the entire day. And then they are taking care of Anganwadis take care of nutrition. They are taking care of some basic inputs of the 3 R's in terms of education. So that is happening. But again, I feel that, and also surprisingly, one of the reports, recent reports also is saying that rural, women's participation in workforce in rural India is also stemming from self-employment. So a lot of women are taking into enterprise. But then again, they also need that support system to be able to work. They need to, we need to give them something whereby they don't need to worry about their children. For that, so we do have like I said, one is the Anganwadi, which is doubling up, which is definitely at least one step towards, creating a support system. In urban India, we have some schools which are like daycare schools, but those are not for everyone. They are not affordable. So something like that, those structures we need to think of again in rural India, as well as affordable options in urban India. Another thing that if we are looking at because one of the recent reports, I think it was by KPMG or was it McKinsey, I can't remember, but it said that annual GDP growth can increase by 4.2% if we increase women's participation in the workforce. Now, if that is the case, then we need to take this seriously, and we need to look at it as an infrastructure investment. So, if I'm looking at infrastructure investment, say, for example, I am based in Bombay, where a 10-kilometer distance will take you about 1.5 hours to travel. Now, when you have such commute, when you do not have, a robust public transportation system, you can't expect a child to be taken, to travel for 2.5 hours every day to work with the parent, right? Because the creche happens to be there. And then again come back in the evening, which means that the child starts working even attending school, right? Just to go to the creche and come back. So, every neighborhood, just like you have police stations in every neighborhood and beach chowkis in every neighborhood, I think you need to have that kind of, a creche facility in every neighborhood to enable mothers to work. We have gated communities. Urban India, there's this thriving of gated communities. Gated communities are seeing every day enough number of domestic help. In fact, without domestic help, most of the women from those gated communities will not be able to work. Yet, nobody thinks about a creche, a daycare center in that gated community for the children of support staff. So you can actually have just like you have water harvesting in many cities compulsory, because we are trying to address environmental needs and climate change. You also need to have, a daycare center compulsory for these gated communities, right? Where we can take care of, then women can peacefully go to work and work through the day. In terms of the other thing I thought that is important is in terms of skill building, because, like Shipra mentioned about the requirement, you do need skilled childcare professionals. So, and there is, again, we are also creating job and training through that, whereby you have childcare trained staff to take care of whether it is the daycare centers in a corporate or in the gated communities, or in rural India, where you have the Anganwadi, and because the Anganwadi worker and the helper are already, they have enough on their plate. So you need to create another cadre of childcare staff who can take care of the children, so that the mothers are, are able to work. And one more thing that I wanted to also mention is in terms of in the corporate sector, like Neha mentioned about how you kind of help inhibition to come back to work, right? One more thing which I feel needs to be looked into is that, the performance matrix needs to incorporate the gendered role, of a woman, because like it or not, I mean, yes, like Shipra, I agree that it should be parental and not the mother's responsibility, but we end up taking most of the responsibility. Willy-nilly, it just comes on to us. So I feel that the performance matrix, because otherwise what happens, especially, in any job environment, which is competitive, somewhere, either there is this whole thing that, oh, you are not doing enough, because you have flexi working hours, maybe you're taking too many leaves because your child falls ill, which are not said directly on your face, but definitely gets reflected in your career growth. So then, it's not rewarding. And I think at the end of the day, a woman ends up working, ends up taking, the care responsibility, but somehow loses out on both sides. because it doesn't. So I think the performance matrix needs to address that and incorporate that in it, because only then will it help a woman to kind of stay motivated in her work and continue to be able to work with enjoy her workspace, right? Yeah, so I think the other thing I wanted to also mention, I think Rupaji also mentioned that yes, I mean, hospitals, for instance, largest concentration of women, but we don't see any daycare facilities there. And I think there a daycare facility both for the staff, including doctors and nurses, as well as patient caregivers, because again, most patient caregivers are women, because a woman's job is not important, right? Even today, a man's job is important. So he is not the person who is likely to take leave to look after an ailing patient in the hospital. So I think, so these are areas. Parliament, it's now that I think in 2018, they mentioned about having a creche. So imagine a country where the parliament has not thought about childcare, and yet we are discussing, how it is important for the economy. So it tells you that we still have a long way to go, but I think we can still catch up on the years by being a little proactive, and ensure that these are places where we begin with skilled staff taking care of the children, and I think that will help. And one last point, if you look at the Maternity Benefit Act, where it talks about having a creche, again, the informal sector is not going to be, the compliance rate in our country is abysmal. So how are you going to ensure that that there is compliance to these acts? And then, it says in the act, it mentions that a woman is eligible only if she has been working for a period of 80 days in the past 12 months. Now, with contractual employment, we have seen that usually the contracts are for 11 months so that you can't show them as being working continuously, right? So, when you have a law like that, obviously, again, there are going to be loopholes. The Maternity Benefit Act drew from, other acts, including the Mines Act. And I have had considerable years of working in the mining sector. And trust me, there are no creches there, because the women are not even counted as workers in the mines. And therefore, so when we're talking about the workforce, 90% of them are really invisible. So for an invisible workforce, how do you ensure that the act is complied with? Is something that is going to be challenging. And until unless we have robust implementation mechanisms, I don't think that we will be able to plug this gap and help women to, work without the stress of where is my child, who is looking after the child, and what happens tomorrow. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bekham. It was very, very interesting point about performance metrics indeed. And I'm sure a lot of people will agree to that. And yes, there is a need for transformative change in terms of our gendered perception related to childcare. When we talk about childcare, most of us think of women, and also about the age of children. Like how when we talk about childcare, we also have an image of a very young child in our minds. So yes, we need to overcome that bias as well. And yes, in my experience of working in the education sector earlier, I've observed that children actually drop out usually after a certain age. Most of them drop out when they are 6th or 8th standard. So that is literally a concern. And yes, affordable childcare. With respect to that, I think recently in April, childcare was crash facilities were provided to lawyers in Delhi High Court as well. So it is very recent. Even in the government organizations, there are no crash facilities. So I don't know how we will be progressing from that. But of course, we should not lose our hopes and look forward to a situation where everybody gets to have affordable childcare. And very valid point about having childcare in the societies, and basically just having it everywhere, just like you have like washrooms or something. It's just very important to have like what if people are working, then where will their children go, very young children go? And if they can't able to, if there are no such provisions to, they would not be able to take care of children, they'll have to leave their jobs. And there are multiple examples, I'm sure you and I, all of us know of many examples where a lot of people have left their jobs to take care of their children. So now we'll start with the Q&A session, and I'll have some questions for the panelists. And I'll start with Rupa. So you have worked at the grassroots level in India in the development sector. So childcare related stress has worsened globally due to especially after the COVID situation. So I want to know, and we all want to know from you, that how does it impact businesses, employees, and their families in your observation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Timisha, and I must thank everyone for such a lovely presentation and enlightening us with so much information. Yes, as you said that in a business, definitely there's a high attrition rate and lots of stress. Like, this high attrition rate post-COVID or pre-COVID also, it was just because of childcare, because we were all quoting, as Shipraji already, so nicely, presented in her presentation, Neha was talking about, and at last, Dr. Basu was talking about the same, that the actually business and the industries are suffering with the high attrition rate because of this, lack of family friendly policy. Another thing is that reducing the productivity of the retaining the productive employees, because it is the same time. I was just thinking aloud and thinking that productive age as well as the reproductive age, so both age are almost same. So once they are reached to the highest level of skills, and then they got pregnant, and ultimately they are leaving job. So can you imagine, we all are suffering because of that. Another thing is the gender diversity, which you beautifully said just now, that actually perception control the reality. And when we have this gender diversity on workforce and a workplace, so we don't have that women perception. So many good policies, many good decisions, many good, initiative could not take that way it should be. So just because of having the low representation of women in that area, as you said that from the employee point of view, yes, as I was just quoting few personal example, like how stress, it's not only the mental stress, it's a physical stress. I have seen many ladies, they're suffering with the postpartum psychosis. Even when I got pregnant and I delivered a baby, it was a year. I've been suffering with the postpartum psychosis, and I wasn't aware of that. Despite being in healthcare, I was thinking that, maybe because I don't have time for myself, and therefore I feel like that. And then ultimately, we are deteriorating our well-being at personal, family level, and social level. And ultimately, this is directly, indirectly affecting the finance part. Either because of low productivity, or we have to leave the job, or we are not as productive. I still hate that comment which people started giving, bluntly at a workplace. Oh, after baby, you are not that good in your work. It actually hurts. It hurt me. It hurt any women or a male person. When people started, left, right, center giving such comments, and it actually, make you such a stress in your mind, and then you start putting your extra effort and not giving full time and productivity and quality to your workplace as well as your family, because you started fighting in your family and saying that, oh, because of you and your babies and everyone, I couldn't give good time to my work. And last but not the least is the families. I have seen traveling all over places, family, just because of baby care, because that was my story also. As Dr. Basu clearly said, that it is very difficult. I didn't have time that I can travel almost 1.5 hours. I had to go to nearby to my relative place where I can keep my baby safely, and then I started traveling again, and that ultimately lead you a burnout. Sometimes people have to pay extra to just living nearby to their organization. Sometimes that place is not very, living friendly. So definitely business, employee itself, as well as families, social, everything is affecting because not having a friendly policy as fortunately Airtel has and we don't. Thank you very much.
I think I'm muted. Thank you, Rupa. I completely agree on the points that a lot of like people have to go through a lot of challenges because the childcare situation, and like the COVID situation also gave us the insights about how it has impacted a lot of parents while working and also taking care of their children, which was not very easy. Of course, I cannot very much relate with that, but I've heard a lot of stories from my colleagues as well, and I've seen them during the Zoom sessions also how it how it gets impacted and all. So now I would like to invite Miss Neha to talk about her insights on how does a positive approach towards childcare by businesses help working parents. And can you share any examples? You've already shared a lot of insights during your presentation, but then it will be great if you share more.
Yeah, Demisha, I think this one doesn't really need an explanation because, after everything that we've heard today, we realize that it's quite obvious that providing that support system is going to help working parents. But maybe I can share one or two examples, right? And we spoke about the burden of care falling on some women, during COVID, and we had a really smart young lady who was really sort of rising fast. And during COVID, she could not have any help coming into her household because she had elderly parents, etc. She had young kids. And therefore, after trying to manage all of this for a month or two, there was burnout, and she reached out to us stating that she wanted to kind of move on and quit her role. And at that point, we engaged, we requested her to take a couple of days off. We gave her an extended sabbatical leave, um, enabled a support system so that she could work from home for an extended period of time. And I think after having about 8-9 months of settling down time of managing this, she kind of came back to work, and obviously we were thrilled. That's one story. I think the other one is my own experience. um, uh, After I returned from maternity, there was a role that required me to travel a little bit. And of course, with a few months old, it was not something that I could do. And therefore, what Airtel enabled me to do is to have a caregiver actually travel with me, and they bore that cost. And so that's something that really helped, because otherwise there is no chance that I could have taken that step in my career. I think the other one is the allowances piece, right? And that's something that we've heard from so many of our other corporate partners reach out to us to say, how are you managing this? How are you getting reimbursement, pay slips, etc.? Because this is an unorganized sector. We don't normally have nannies giving invoices. And I think that's another one that we've taken a step to say that it's something that we will enable, we will trust, and therefore we will not rely on reimbursements and invoices. We will give it as a blanket outcome to our people. I think at the end of it, what I'm trying to say is that despite all of the policies, despite an ecosystem, what we have to realize that childcare needs are very unique to each individual. No two journeys, no two lives are the same. And therefore, as an organization, as any organization, one has to think about creating a broad principle-based framework and then actually deal with this on a person by person, case by case basis. And that's really what is going to help, because everybody's journey is different, everybody's needs are different. So that's where I want to leave it.
That's true. I completely agree with that. I'm sure everybody's nodding to that, and this is very moving. Also, like I think every person has their own journey in every way, and in terms of care work as well. And a lot of women also, like some people are able to, I've heard stories, I cannot say from experience, but I've heard stories where I've been told that, okay, X person could come to office when she was 8 months pregnant. Why can't others do that? Like, but then some person, like, but there are stories where other persons were like 4 months pregnant and they are feeling very weak. So it also there are so many things, so many debates around it as well. And yes, um, so now I would like to invite Ms. Shipra. Ms. Shipra, based on your experience of working on projects related to early childhood development, how does the childcare provision support early childhood development at the workplace? And do you think if childcare at the workplace was more common, it would help in women empowerment as a whole?
Yeah, I think I think I'll echo again what Neha said, because all our presentations like again and again mentioned about what young children need, and of course, I mean, there's no doubt that the childcare support is critical to get the mothers back to the or the women back to the workforce. And I think, but I also would echo what Dr. Basu said, that I mean, that's only we have a formal sector that we are just talking about. The 90% are in informal sector. We don't even, and I mean, we don't even know there's so much of women workforce which is invisible right now. So I mean, keeping that in mind, certainly this is important. But at the same time, I think the way Neha was mentioning that there's a need, and also Rupa highlighted, there's a need to change the mindset. There's a need to yes, when we talk about the parental leaves, that's one way of saying that it's both job, but then it doesn't stop at that. I think the community as a whole, the government as a whole, as Dr. Basu rightly said, that in the parliament, if we don't have a childcare support, it's like we have a long way to go, where we have been talking about early childhood development as an amazing investment for the country. I'm not just talking about the families. It's like countries can benefit from what we are doing with the young children, especially in the first few years of their lives. So I think internalizing that, not just in terms of the policies, programs, but also in terms of a mindset, uh, even in families where we feel that we still feel that it's our job to care for the child, and it seems little off to expect the same thing from a husband who's doing this, who's working on the same level as you, for him to take care of the young child. So I mean, that kind of a mindset needs to come in for sure. And at the same time, when you ask like how the early childhood development can advance and can help in care for the young children, especially through the support of through the childcare provisions. I think what is critical in these childcare provisions, Tamisha, is that the children need a stable and supportive relationships. They need consistency. They need routine. So that becomes very critical. So wherever the child is going, whether the child is in family or in community or in the childcare support, the child needs that continuity and that routine, because that's something which gives the child a safety and security, and that's what later in life get translated into relationship where the child feels secure. Second thing which is critical is the safe and supportive environment. It is very important to also protect the children from any kind of harm, or any kind of a neglect or abuse, because neglect can actually do really harm to the child's development. I mean, just taking example from one of the studies that was being done in Romania at that time, because of World War, there was a lot of children who were orphaned and then kept in the orphanage. And the one of the things that nurses were doing was just bathing them, cleaning them, feeding them, and then moving on to another child, because it's difficult to take care of children and give one-to-one attention. What eventually happened after the once in the research visited, and over the time they saw that the children have developed a peculiar behavior of rocking themselves, stimulating their own selves, because they are not getting enough stimulation from the environment. So that becomes, so the thing is that childcare responsibility is not just to feed, just to take care of their health, but it's also to provide them with a stimulating environment, stimulate their brain, to talk to the child, to play with the child, to love the child, to give the warmth to the child. So I think that becomes equally critical for the childcare support that we are talking about. And again, coming back to what Dr. Basu was saying, skilled childcare workers are required who understand all these components when it comes to the childcare facilities. And not last, but very important thing is safe and appropriate nutrition for the young children is critical for their healthy brain development, and which ensures that they can, develop well. Why I'm not putting health over here right now? Because health is something which becomes the responsibility of also caregivers. And I feel that at present, the childcare support systems are not well equipped to take care of health of every child. So for that to happen, and because some children, because some diseases are quite infectious and other children can also get it. So the role of the child care support to inform the parent and ensure the child is being taken care of at home, that becomes very critical. And that's why having 6 paid leaves play a very good role in terms of parents giving the time, taking the time off, and taking care of the children at home. So I think that's how I see good quality childcare helping in the early childhood development.
Anybody else would like to add to that? What Shipra just said? Rupa, would you like to add anything? No?
No, as such, Tamisha, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Shipra. And I think we have got our answers. And now I have a question for Dr. Bekam Masu. Female labor force participation in India had fallen to 21%, making it one of the lowest in the world. How can employer-supported childcare improve the situation? And there are multiple provisions around it, especially for pregnant and lactating mothers. And could you talk about them and how childcare at the workplace can be made more aspirational?
I think, I mentioned most of that, but just to add that we do have the National Creche Service Scheme. And like I said, that there is Anganwadi, there are Balwaris that are there in rural India. But, it's not adequate. And like I said, you need to have community-based services. Whether it is in urban areas or in rural areas, you need to have. And honestly, I have not even added to the complexity. But say, for example, there are about 79 lakhs children with disability in India. So obviously, right, they also have parents. Some of them would have fallen out of the workforce, just taking care of them. Because if at least my experience of working in urban slums, I know that the mothers are the ones who have to take care. One person needs to be there at home just to take care. So like I said, we're talking about children who are healthy, who has no issues, right? So we're talking about them. But if we don't provide the right care from the beginning, then we are also looking at a large population who are going to encounter problems. And like, Shipra said that, yes, they need a routine, they need, somebody who will understand them. And then, so those are things which we are not addressing, right? Also in terms of, we're not looking at the caste dynamics that we have. When my experience of working with with Anganwadis and ICDS, and I saw this in Tamil Nadu, I saw this in Karnataka, I saw this in Andhra, that there is discrimination that happens right from even actually before the child is born, because if you have an Anganwadi located in an upper caste area, typically access to children from another caste is prohibited, right? So these are also issues that we are grappling with. So which is why I keep harping that you need to have community-based initiatives and services. Because the larger issues of discrimination, caste, I'm not even kind of trying to address here. But if you have it within the community, both in urban and in rural areas, then I think it actually takes care of certain, it addresses some of the problems. In the corporate sector, again, like I said, those contractual staff gets left out, right? So they are the ones who, there is a lot of stress there. So how do you address that? Like for example, now I think Neha will also, of course, they will, I'm sure they have this, where they have tie-up with creche daycare centers, so that you can, in your locality, if you have a daycare center and if your company has a tie-up, then they will subsidize it. And but again, I mean, in like, for instance, in a place like Bombay, it's not possible, because there are so many locations. People are traveling like 3 hours away from 2 hours away. How do you kind of provide that and quality, right? So there will be these upper class areas where the quality of that same creche will be much better, while in another area it's not going to be that good, right? So those are things that you're grappling with. Work from home is definitely not an option. Had that been an option, you wouldn't have seen people dropping out of the workplace, because it doesn't absolve you from your your duties at home. In fact, it is double work. See, at any point in time, it's double work for women. And then so therefore I think so I agree with Neha that it has to be tailor-made, because different like different pregnant women, the experience is not the same, right? Medical issues are there. There are different problems that are there. Similarly with children also, it can't be the same. So you need to have a combination. So while there are daycare facilities provided at the workplace, you also need to have community daycare centers. Skilling is a very important aspect. You've seen, right? Like those families who can afford, they have had a CCTV camera and they have kind of seen what kind of an abuse takes place. Again, we are not even talking about child abuse in daycare centers or by individual nannies when they are left. We're not even looking at all that, right? But I'm just saying that we need to it has to be a combination, and it has to be at an infrastructural level. It cannot be at this each company takes an initiative and we kind of it's not going to work. That's not going to help women to get back to the workforce. Yeah, so I think
well, a lot of thoughts now. Yes, caste system is also a concern. There's discrimination against children. Even at there could be discrimination against the children at the childcare center as well. And of course, child protection is a concern as well at the childcare centers.
No question, Temisha, but I would definitely say that I'm going away with a completely new perspective, which is at an individual, at an org, at a unit level. How do we make sure that we are in parallel thinking about the extended workforce that we have and enabling them as well? And I think that's a sense of responsibility that I'm going away with today. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Neha.
I just want to add one line with what Neha just said, that I'm also feeling a little empowered after listening all, such dynamic views and, resilient ladies. And I will be more vocal for such things now. Thank you very much for changing my perception and bringing new reality. Thanks, Atul.
And of course, it has been very enlightening for me as well. A lot of work is actually being done on this. From corporate perspective, with civil society organizations, and with NGOs and all. So it is very inspiring as well that there are people who are thinking about this, and and together we can actually work towards it to make the situation better in future. And also real life experiences. There are some positive experiences also, which is also like we talk about a lot of negative experiences, but okay, some positive experiences are also there. So maybe we can slowly make those experiences the majority of our experiences. So I think Shifra, would you like to add something?
No, the points have been I kind of agree with all the So yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay, Pekon, if you have anything to add, you can add. Otherwise, I'll start with the. Yes.
No, I have nothing to add, but thank you. I mean, it was really um, uh, enriching to listen to Rupaji. Also, the way she when took us through early childhood care in very
Yes.
short time, but very informative.
Yeah.
And Neha, I mean, I've heard about the Airtel schools, but knowing about, hearing firsthand about how Airtel has been facilitative towards its employees as well. I think it also kind of y'all can do more, so our expectation also increases. But I think overall, probably at UNICEF, Airtel, ICC also, because all of you are here, we need to kind of focus much more on this, because I don't think we've done enough in this sector even to understand what what are the constraints that are there, and like Neha said, how because there are a lot of individual requirements, right? So how do you kind of try to put it in a package that will help women to come, and more in terms of the 90% workforce that is there. Maybe as CSR or something, if y'all can address this, I think that will really help. Because on one hand, we're asking girls to get educated, but then after a point, career options also then becomes difficult, because you are kind of trying to balance your familial responsibilities. So maybe something, if one can look at that, would be helpful. Yeah. So thank you very much for this platform.
Great. We appreciate everyone for taking out the time and joining us today. Additionally, I would like to thank our outstanding panelists for the constructive discussion on childcare, key pillar of family-friendly policies. Now we know that quality childcare that is both accessible and inexpensive can ensure young children's positive development, women's empowerment, and economic progress. There is a need to provide adequate support, however, to caregivers with a gender-neutral approach. Care responsibilities often compromise women's economic empowerment, as we discussed already, and they further contribute to gender disparity. And there's a lot of work to be done to change that. And at CFFPIE, we believe that investing in children is investing in future's resilient and sustainable economy. We will continue to amplify ongoing discussions around employer-provided childcare and inclusive growth in India. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next discussion in our CFFPIE webinar series on related topics. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tamisha.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Everyone. Thank you. Be safe. Take care.